If you ask me, I don't think it's going to be asteroids or nuclear war that wipes us out. It's going to be this.
We are talking about the vampire series on Netflix, V-Wars. Now, this one stars Somerhalder, who you may know from the Vampire Diaries, and Adrian Holmes. You've also got Laura Vander Voort, who was in the Smallville Supergirl series and things like this, and a slew of other faces as well. Apparently based on a comic book series or graphic novel series, adapted for Netflix in a 10-episode season 1, which we're going to discuss. It came out in late 2019, so I'm a little late to the party with this, but having been, at home because of the coronavirus, I've had a little bit more time to catch up on the series. So I haven't seen many people talk about this, to be honest with you, online, so I thought I'd give my thoughts. So we have had a few more serious takes on the kind of serious series of vampires within the recent years. We've had The Strain, obviously, which was Guillermo del Toro's baby. Then we had also one called The Passage, which was sadly only lasted one season. And they kind of have this of more adult, taking it seriously vibe, really kind of getting away from the Twilight, of course. Somerhalder was in the Vampire Diaries, which is, of course, very similar to the Twilight movies in a lot of ways. At least I think so. I've never watched either of them, but that's how it appears to me, at least. So here we have essentially a new story which, tweaks some of the kind of the mythology of vampires that we've seen before. We have Luther Swann, played by Somerhalder, and Michael Fayne, played by Adrian Holmes, two friends. Swann is a renowned doctor and scientist, and they are sent to investigate a disappearance of some scientists in this remote research facility under the, where they've been discovering things in the ice caps and things like this. And they discover that there's this new biological agent. Now, both of these guys are affected, and Fayne seems to develop vampire-like abilities, whilst Swann seems to be, somewhat immune, although it does kind of make him sick. And this kind of vampire pathogen, so to speak, is not transmitted through bites. It actually just is transmitted like a cold and things like that. So very much like our coronavirus now in 2020, this exponentially starts spreading, and people with a certain genetic kind of marker, so we say, are then predisposed to potentially becoming vampires. To add further kind of ripples in the effect, the vampire strain actually splits in two, with two distinct types of vampires. The Bloods, which are the more kind of vicious, feral and monstrous kind of vampires. Then we have this offshoot called the Verdalac, I believe they are, and they are a little bit more your classic refined vampires who don't necessarily kill the victims, but suck the blood out, and they look slightly different, and there you go. Then within the human kind of sort of side, obviously, there is dissension in the ranks, with various different government factions having different ideas about what to do. On the human side, obviously, Swann is the kind of the lead scientist, as he was the first person to really discover this, and he finds out the key may well be within his son. We have a few other kind of subplots and characters going on, but first of all, let's talk about what works first of all here. Okay, so based on the graphic novel, that I'm not familiar with, I'll be honest with you, but this obviously is drawing from pre-existing material. So some of the critiques I feel, I'm not sure if it has come from the TV show or if it originated in the actual comic books, I will say. But what works first of all, I've got to say, having not watched the Vampire Diaries, I'm less familiar with Ian Somerhalder. I've seen him in a few movies and things here and there, but I've got to say I thought he was pretty good here. As the same with Adrian Holmes. They have a great chemistry where you really do feel like these guys are legitimately friends, and they have a fantastic chemistry that they're almost frenemies, I guess you want to say, rivals, and they're on opposing kind of sides, but they still have a love and respect for each other. And I think the performances from both actors are excellent here. And, you know, it's made me kind of, you know, have a lot more of a higher estimation for young Ian there. But I've got to say, I think the majority of the cast here do a pretty good job with some convincing kind of performances and stuff like that. The series is quite large scale as well, getting ever progressively bigger. This kind of like this contagion is spreading, so we do get a real sense of scope and kind of ratcheting up of the threat levels here. There are plenty of twists and turns within this series, lots of double crosses. Things like this, kind of plot twists that are going to happen with different kind of dissension falling both in the vampire ranks and the human ranks alike. The movie has, I keep calling it a movie. The series has quite a large ensemble cast with many different kind of B-plots, some which work, some which don't, I will say. And I've got to say, there is an adult approach to this. We have kind of a lot of swearing, quite a lot of gore effects here for a kind of a sort of TV show. I thought the gore effects are actually done to a pretty good standard. And I've got to say that the actual story, although I have some critiques with it, which we'll come on to, I've got to say I was quite enthralled. I wanted to see what was happening next. It took me a while to get around to watching this. I didn't think the trailers made it look all that good, but after watching the first episode, I thought it's a strong first episode, and it got me hooked into kind of wanting to watch the series and pretty much binge it over the course of kind of the 2 days. And, you know, I had a good time with it for the most part. What critiques have I got? Okay, so on a kind of visual side, first of all, I've got to say I think some of the vampire effects here are a little weak. They've opted to go for CGI kind of vampire animated mouths, and I don't know, I mean, I think there may be some makeup involved as well, but there are obviously CGI enhancements and they do not look good, unfortunately. I would have preferred they had stuck with a more practical effect, because it really is quite, you know, quite bad looking at times. I'll kind of refer to this to show Supernatural, which I know has a lot of fans, but that to me always bothered me that all the monsters look more or less the same and the vampires just had CGI teeth and things like that. And it's kind of like that, to be honest with you. The Verdal Act sort of storyline where we have this kind of subgroup seems peripheral, to be honest with you. Now, I'm assuming this is coming from the actual comic books itself, but at this point in time, certainly within season 1, they really didn't need to be 2 types of vampires. There's no special purpose, so it doesn't really do anything else, really. There just is 2 vampire strains, and there's no real story plots involving that, to be honest. There are also some peripheral characters here. Laura, and there's also, this all feeds into possibly my biggest issue, but like Laura Vandervoort's character, who is this vampire who is trying to resist the urge to kill people, really has nothing to do, to be honest with you, in this season 1, and it's just a setup for season 2. Put a pin in that, we're going to come back to that. She also has a very ill-judged and unconvincing love story. Some of the kind of logic here doesn't make sense, and also the timeline seems a bit like wibbly-wobbly to me. The pathogen just seems to pop up wherever it feels like, wherever the story demands it. Because it spreads a bit like a cold, and it just seems to pop up in places where Fayne has never been, and if that makes sense. And I get that people travel around and stuff, but it seems to happen a little bit too quick, because this almost feels like it's taken place after, you know, a few days. People's reaction to there being vampires seems a little bit muted, and they seem to be accepting of it a little bit too quickly. Things like this. So there are a few kind of logic issues here that just seem to be sloppy writing, if I'm being honest. And when you have a long form of storytelling, like a TV show, there's not really the excuse for that, because you can argue maybe in a movie that you have to kind of like skip past certain things. But when you have the option to do a 10-episode series, really this should have had a little bit more thought put into it, I would say. The main issue I have with this season is this is like a preview for season 2. This seems like a 10-episode preview for season 2. There's so much setup here for the next season. We really feel like that is all that this season is doing to a certain degree. It does not have a complete story for the season 1. And let's be honest, Netflix does not have their best track record of keeping series going for that long, really. They like to have maybe 2 seasons and then they're cut. Because the way the Netflix model works is it does stuff to sign new customers up. That's how they track their success. It doesn't really care about if you are then going to leave, if that makes sense. It doesn't really track once you have kept your subscription. All they want to do is it has new sign-ups. So if a series is there to get you signed up, once you're signed up, they kind of lose interest. And we've seen that outside of the big shows like, Stranger Things, Orange is the New Black, things like that, there's many, many shows that have just been cut and forgotten about. And I wonder where there's been so much set up for a season 2, is that actually going to happen, let alone a kind of a season 3. Now, like I've said, because this is based on existing source material, some of these critiques may well have come from the source material, but I feel you have to adapt it. And I feel that certainly this first season, although it's very watchable in regards to a great premise and some good characters, it was far too concerned with setting up season 2 to the point where it's a little bit of a joke, and there's some logic issues. I have to say the final episode as well, the last 15 minutes of the final episode goes into some really cheesy territory. And without kind of giving anything away, there is a rise of a potential new rank for someone that just seems ridiculously stupid based on what's happened to the rest of the season, to be honest with you. And there's a few other things there. We have a bit of a time jump, and that time jump is like mega cheesy, does not make a lot of sense, and it may well be just retconned or whatever in season 2, but for season 1 it just comes across as a lot of cheese, unfortunately. That being said, I do think this is a fun series to watch. It certainly is an enjoyable, fun ride, and it does have a degree of maturity to it, but I just wish they had maybe had made some smarter choices in some of the writing here. Now, like I said, I don't know if these problems are coming from the source material or if it's decisions made by the people who have made this streaming service. But if it wasn't the source material, I do feel they could have adapted it better to fit on a kind of a show. But it's a fun ride, and hopefully we'll get more of it. But I do hope that they tend to be a little bit more self-contained if they do a season 2 and not have loads, essentially the whole plot that trail off into a potential season 3 if that ever happens. Anyway, I'll give this show a 6 out of 10. It's certainly watchable. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.